You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All right, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and I am joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing great, man. But football is back in full swing, right? We had the Hall of Fame game. We had DTR running all over the Jets and, creating some splash plays, something for people to talk about. But we're in training camp. We got, a couple minor injuries. I don't think anything super serious yet. So that's been a good thing. Draft season is either upon us or quickly coming up, depending on your level of addiction to this great game of fantasy football. But I am doing a ton of basketball drafts. So I'm not going to lie. I'm in a ton of them right now. So it's been fun. I love it. It's my favorite time. This starts like my stretch of favorite shows we do, where it's all about drafting and why we draft and what our thoughts were and different strategies and kind of what you're looking at and off to the races. So I'm all about it. I can't wait to get started. But first, why don't you guys tell me how you're doing, since I just rambled on.
I'm good. It was fun to put football on the TV, right? Like NFL football. I did that for that Hall of Fame game on Thursday, and then there'll be some more NFL football games. Air quotes NFL football team. There were players on NFL franchises who played football on Thursday, and there will be more players on NFL franchises that will play football in the coming days. Whether or not, I guess, as we saw from one Sean Payton, he said that the starters are definitely going to play in the preseason because they didn't last year, and we saw how well that worked out for the Denver Broncos. So we're going to see some more football coming up, and training camps coming up, or training camps in full swing. I'm excited. I'm just excited to see kind of what some of these teams look like, what some of these rookies look like against like competition, right? You don't always get a good idea of how talented they actually are, because sometimes they're going up against lesser competition week in and week out in college. And that's nothing, there's just some differences there. And thank God that this is an NFL fantasy football show, because if we were talking college football right now, what a colossal mess that is right now. What a colossal mess.
So, Kevin hit the nail on the head that this is kind of draft season and level of addiction. For some of us, we never really stopped drafting until the season started, and have been drafting ever since the Super Bowl kind of ended there. But definitely picking up, and it seems like I'm never not on the clock this time of year. So always a lot of fun there. And we've got a lot of great shows, right? Like, we're going to start off with the kind of the first episode right now of the fantasy draft strategies there. So if you got questions, throw them out there. Love talking this thing through. Love going through all of that. So make sure that you're hitting that up, talking to us about what it is that you need, what you want, all that kind of good stuff. And then make sure that you're heading over to YouTube, clicking that subscribe button, ringing that bell, getting the notifications, because we've got the player profile videos coming quick, fast, in a hurry. Right now, we're releasing 7-8 videos a day over there on the YouTube channel to get y'all, some bite-sized videos as far as the players go, and what to be looking for, and help you guys when you're drafting there and getting ready to draft. So make sure that you are rocking and rolling on that. Real quick before we get into it, we did have a question come in on Twitter earlier today. And so we're going to hit that up here real quick, because it talks all about draft strategy here. And 5-0 over on Twitter said that they have the 10th pick in this year's 14-person full PPR league. They're stuck between Devontae Adams, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, if he's still available there, or even reach for Stephon Diggs. Who to choose drafting 10th in a 14-person full PPR? Which way would you kind of recommend they roll?
If you're drafting 10th, I'm looking for Saquon or Nick Chubb. So, personally, I can fill that back on. I can bring that back with a Waddle, Olave, Calvin Ridley, even, right? Like, I think he deserves being up in that category. He's being underdrafted just a touch in most areas right now. So how I would like to play that is I would like a upper echelon running back and follow it up with a very high end wide receiver. So for me at 10, I'm looking Nick Chubb, Saquon are probably the guys that I'm looking at. Typically, Diggs is going to be gone. I think Devontae Adams, with where he's currently going, there's a chance he might come back to you. Like, it's been weird because of the uncertainty with him and the Raiders and Garoppolo and everything else. And there's nothing wrong with Adams, but you have a much greater shot of Adams coming back to you in the second and getting two guys that you might feel that are first round caliber, as opposed to doing it the other way around, because those running backs will all be gone. And you almost put yourself in a position where you have to go, either double wide receiver or maybe reach a little bit for a quarterback to try and diversify yourself a little bit. Kelsey's going to be gone. It's too early for Andrews. And you're kind of reaching at that spot when it comes back to you at pick. What is that? It'd be the pick 18, 19. No, you said 14 team, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So 14. Yeah. So 18. You're kind of reaching. Maybe a Josh Jacobs comes back with where he's been sliding to, which is possible, but it's all uncertain, right? But I know that I can grab Saquon or Nick Chubb. Those guys are 95% of the time, one of the two of them is there. And then you can follow that up with a Jalen Waddle, a Chris Olave, like I said, a Calvin Ridley are the three guys that really come to mind that I'd like there. On top of whoever else who might fall, right? Maybe Devontae Adams does fall and you can pick him up. But that is where I would lean going into a full PPR league. Maybe I give the tip to Saquon with it being a full point because he's a little bit more involved in the passing game than Nick Chubb has been. But there's really no one behind Nick Chubb this season. So it's going to be interesting to see if he gets more passing work, because if he catches 40, 45 balls through the course of the season, that's icing on the cake, because typically that's not Nick Chubb, right? Normally he catches about 20 and that's it.
You'd have to think that there's some addition by subtraction there, huh? With Kareem Hunt vacating. I would add that if you don't, if you miss out on those running backs, with it being a full point PPR, a Tyreek Hill is available around that time in most places. So I would say Tyreek Hill is another person, see if they can recreate what they had going last year in Miami with how much he was targeted and how many receptions he had. And I agree with you, Kevin, that you might be able to get Devontae Adams on the return. I think Josh Jacobs would still be there on that in that second round. So you could get a Tyreek Hill and a Josh Jacobs, and I think you'd probably feel pretty confident about your first two picks there.
I'm more on the let's go get Nick Chubb train. I can tell you right now, I've drafted a whole lot of drafts so far this season, coming out of the 10 hole, 11 hole, 12 hole type of thing in the first round. And Nick Chubb, I can usually get him there. And if Nick Chubb's not there, Saquon's usually there. Like one of those two guys is typically there for me to be able to pick up and rock and roll with. And I'll absolutely take that one. And then couple that up with a wide receiver in the second round and really just kind of start off as a balanced attack there. And we'll talk about a balanced draft strategy here later on there. As Alex likes to say, that's what they call a tease. So we'll absolutely talk about the balanced kind of strategy there on that one. But yeah, like I've even seen a few of these things where you can pick up, Jalen Waddle in the second round. Like that'd be a pretty good one there. I've seen a couple of times where Amon-Ra or Garrett Wilson have slipped a little bit into that. Now it might be tougher since you've got a 14 person roster there, or 14 person league, where they may not necessarily slide all the way back there, but there's a good chance that you can rock and roll. At worst, start off with Nick Chubb, Jalen Waddle, and that's a heck of a start to your roster. So I would absolutely like that one there. Hopefully that helps you out there. Guys, any other thoughts on that question? We ready to start rocking and rolling?
Let's do it.
All right. Real quick before we do it, comments coming in. So the Bayou Bengal Fantasy Network saying, hey, everyone, hit that like button, y'all. Thank you very much for that one. Kevin over on the YouTube saying, let's go. And then we got the Stacks flashing some fire at us. I like that one. Leadership Lesson saying that they can't wait to hear the boys' strategies. And then Kevin saying, rub dub Chubb. I like it. So absolutely. Nick Chubb should do very well for you and is, I think, being a little underdrafted. Take the value, y'all. All righty. So behind the scenes for everybody, we went through and cooked up some different mocks and some different strategies, and we're going to get to that here in a minute. But before we do, we're going to kind of break the ice here a little bit with some of the new little segment we're going to roll out here called Dude or Don't. Basically the boys' version of Sleeper or Bust for everybody else in the fantasy world, but Dude or Don't. And let's go ahead and start off with the Dude. That's the sleeper that we're looking at here. And Alex, why don't you lead the way here?
Sure. All right. So my dude this year that I think is going to far exceed where he is being drafted is James Conner out of Arizona there. And the reason why I picked James Conner is for twofold. Kyler's hurt, obviously, for the first couple games. Who knows how long that they stretch that out to. So I think running the football is going to be a priority down there. It might be the only way that they're really able to move the football down there in Arizona. So Connor's coming off the board, running back 22 overall, 66th is his draft position. So I think he returns that value. If for nothing else, I think he has a fantastic first quarter to first half of the season as Kyler gets back into, his playing stages. That will probably carry, James Conner into a much higher than running back 22 finish. So my dude, even though I don't know why James Conner is going so far down. There's another guy that we're going to talk about a little bit later on who is also hurt that is going to lend to, or is hurt right now, and it's going to lend to the fact that the Cardinals are going to have to run the football. It's going to be their only option. So I've got James Conner as my dude going into this season.
Right on. So my dude right now, guy I'm targeting is David Montgomery. I've seen him go in kind of a range here, but all range within where David Montgomery is going puts him in prime flex territory. Or if you're kind of waiting on running back and you decide to load up on wide receiver, is prime for kind of your RB2 spot. So David Montgomery is a guy that I've seen go anywhere from the end of the 8th to the beginning of the 11th, right? That's a big spread. But in all these specifically best ball drafts that I've been doing, massive range. I love being able to pick him up as a third, sometimes fourth running back early. And that way I can go high upside receiver later in the draft, because if he's my fourth running back by the 8th round, I don't have to touch the position until late, just to kind of balance some things out. So I like it a lot. He's playing in an offense that gave Jamal Williams, 31 goal line carries last year. 31 goal line carries. That's a massive opportunity for touchdowns. And Jamal Williams was able to cash in on that. I know we like Jahmyr Gibbs, but Jahmyr Gibbs is not a traditional between the tackles guy, right? He's going to get out wide. He's going to be used in passing plays. We have to see what his pass pro looks like at the pro level. And whether we like it or not, you can almost be certain that come week 12, there's a rookie wall that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to hit, right? David Montgomery hasn't hit that, or doesn't have to worry about that. He's a pro. He's been, he's been through this. He knows how to pace and condition himself for the long haul. And he's in an offense that does like to run the ball inside the 5. That is going to be his calling card. Touchdown upside. He's going to see more than enough carries throughout the season. I wouldn't be surprised if he saw somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 and 215, 220 carries, maybe more if the Lions are able to step up their defense and kind of pull away from some of these teams instead of some track meets that they were in last year. But it is the touchdown upside that goes along with this, because while Jamal Williams had 17 last year, I believe, I think David Montgomery is good for a baseline of 12 this year. And if you're getting 12 touchdowns out of a guy that you can get in the 9th or 10th round, that is a gold mine for your fantasy roster.
Yeah, absolutely. Love the value that you can go and get David Montgomery at. My guy, I went deep into this one here, all the way into the ADP of about 155 out there, picking on wide receiver 55 here. And the guy I'm going to go with is Romeo Doubs as the dude right there. So he's a guy that, again, right, if you're taking your shot this late on a guy and he return, like, he should return value for you. This is a guy I could see potentially getting all the way up into fringe wide receiver 2 territory when it's all said and done. This is one of those that we're going to see a little different offense than we have in Green Bay the last forever. So this is one that we're going to see a lot of running game to set up the pass. Jordan Love in his professional career at quarterback here has, granted, very limited sample size. I get that. But he's not a guy that's been throwing the ball down the field and really pushing the ball down the field on a lot of these things. One of those that he has been living and breathing in the about 5-6 yards on 5-6 yards of attempted air, or as an ADOT type of thing, right? That's where he's been playing 5-6 yards. Romeo Doubs does a whole lot of work 5 to 6 yards off the line of scrimmage. So this is one of those, wouldn't surprise me to see him get peppered with targets, end up leading the Packers receivers in receptions this season. May not necessarily lead them in yards, but I think he'll lead them in total receptions on this thing. And he'll just be the chain mover at the wide receiver. So like this guy and like where his upside is. And with this kind of late shot, if I'm wrong, you didn't spend any capital to get that one wrong. So still a big fan on that one. Any other thoughts on the dudes?
I like the Romeo Doubs call. He was a guy that I was looking at before you put him into the show, Doc. I said, for the same reason. I think he could lead the Packers in targets this year. And I don't know that he's going to lead in touchdowns, right? Like, he is going to be doing it's a little bit more shorter work, but he has the potential to be one of the best wide receiver 2s in the league going forward, right? If Jordan Love develops correctly and Romeo Doubs does everything well, but he doesn't do anything great, right? He doesn't have great speed. He has good speed. He doesn't have great route running capabilities. He's good at route running. His hands aren't great. They're good. So he is a tier or 2 down from these top guys, but volume is your friend. And these passes have to go somewhere in Green Bay. And Romeo Doubs, along with Christian Watson, are the 2 more senior members of this Green Bay wide receiver core going into their sophomore season. So there's a lot to like about this. I like the return that you get on here a lot, because I think there is no way Doubs finishes below wide receiver 40 at absolute worst. And so you're already giving yourself a nice little cushion by picking him up late just as a filler and seeing if it hits.
Absolutely. All righty. Let's go ahead and head on over to the don'ts. Who are you not looking to put on your roster? Who's a don't for you? Alex, go ahead.
As an abrupt about face from what this show has been, and I am only speaking for myself here, but the guy that I am avoiding is one-time Good Old Boys Fantasy Football podcast darling, DJ Moore. His move to Chicago has scared the ever-living out of me. He is coming off the board as wide receiver 20, overall 56th. I don't think he finishes wide receiver 20. I don't even know that he finishes in wide receiver 2, which is 24 territory. So I do not believe that the passing game is effective there in Chicago. I know that there are reports out there that Justin Fields' throwing motion is everything that it's expected to be. I don't believe it. They have really good running backs. They have plenty of options there through the air. You've got Cole Kmet there as your tight end. You've got Robert Tonyan. You've got Mercedes Lewis on the roster. Those are big targets, and they're fast, short routes for a quarterback that doesn't throw the football. So I think that there are other options for Justin Fields should he get a pass off, and it's not going to be to DJ Moore. So I am avoiding DJ Moore like the plague.
Yeah, you were definitely speaking for yourself on that one.
The opinions of Alex Egan are not based off of good old boy content, please. Take it with a grain of salt. No. It's fine. Derek and I differ on that. We were talking about that pre-show. But you know, all that's fine, well, and good. We'll get into this on a later day. But for the bus, Marquise Hollywood Brown. Mainly because I'm not going to pick a guy to be my second or third wide receiver and just hope things kind of click by the end of the year. Like at that point, I'm not going to give you 6 weeks of freebies if I'm drafting you in the first 5 or 6 rounds. I expect you to be on the field, and I expect you to be producing for my fantasy football team. And since we don't know when Kyler's taking the field, I don't know if I'm ever taking Marquise Brown this season. I've actively avoided him. I've pivoted into different directions. The skill set isn't bad. We saw when Kyler was healthy and when Nuke Hopkins was out last year that he can be a number one guy, right? Marquise Hollywood Brown had a great first half of the season last year. Great first half. Then the ankle injury, then Nuke Hopkins came back, and then the ankle injury came and it fell off a cliff. So this isn't completely on Brown, but I don't trust anyone not named Kyler to force feed him the ball. And I don't know where they're going to generate offense in Arizona. If Kyler has any type of setback, right? It was a late season injury. So if he has any type of setback, or if the Cardinals are just going to play cautious with him because they paid him a lot of money last year, whatever have you, your shares of Marquise Brown, you're going to be very frustrated with him. So to circumvent that, I am actively avoiding Hollywood Brown. And I am perfectly happy if I'm wrong about this. Okay, but I'm betting the guys that I might be pivoting to are probably going to be just as productive as he was going to be as a one-trick pony, as the Cardinals offense would be as a one-trick pony, not necessarily Brown specifically, because I do like his game. I just don't love it with question marks at quarterback, question marks at offensive line. The defense is getting older. All the red flags here are saying, do not draft me.
Yeah, yes, that pains me to see that name on there. But regardless, my don't on this one is Deebo Samuel coming off the board, ADP of 42, wide receiver 16. This is a guy that we covered a couple of weeks ago when we hit up the Niners. This is a guy that I think he'll either be second or third on the team when it comes to targets this season. I think what we're going to see a lot of what we got last year repeated itself this year. I'd rather have his teammate going several rounds behind him and Brandon Ayuk, who I think will actually outperform Deebo Samuel in fantasy points when it's all said and done. So this is a guy that I am actively avoiding when it's on the clock and making sure, so much so to the point that I ended up missing story behind that one. I'm actively avoiding Deebo Samuel in fantasy drafts this season, especially where you're having to take him as like your second wide receiver in a lot of cases. No, thank you.
All right, so this is one of those moments of the show where we get off in the weeds. But am I the only one who, when they hear Brandon Ayuk's name, thinks of Street Fighter?
No.
Like, that's the only thing that's the only thing I think of. Like, I like Brandon Ayuk just fine.
That doesn't help.
He's going to be the target leader, but every time someone says his name, all I think of is Street Fighter.
And it doesn't help because one of our good friends and league mates, Craig, his cell phone, his text message alert tone was the Hadouken for many, many years. before everybody put their cell phones on silent, and you could buy ringtones or whatever. He had the Hadouken, and that is exactly what I think of every time. Sorry, like you're absolutely correct.
Okay.
Kevin.
I just had to put that out
Yes.
into the pod sphere. Is that the term? Whatever
There you go.
we're going with.
There we go. Into the tubes.
Yeah.
So, alrighty. So, any other thoughts here on the don'ts before we move on into some draft strategy?
No, I think they're all justified. I think out of the 6 guys that we each went through, for me personally, I have probably the biggest differing opinion with DJ Moore. But like we said earlier, like that's fine. Like you have to have guys that you're willing to say, this is not what I'm looking for, right? And we may not all agree on what those guys are, and that's perfectly fine. Alex has his list. There might be some guys that I'm like, I'm not going near this guy. And Alex is like, yes, yeah, I believe in this situation, and I'm willing to take that on. So everybody has a list. It'll be interesting as we kind of get into further drafting, right? And again, a little peek behind the curtain, we'll start talking about tiers, and to really figure out where and what tier we think DJ Moore is going to fit into and how we classify those. As far as who we draft in likeness around him, right? Like if you're liking A and they're taken, will you pivot to DJ Moore or do you pivot somewhere else?
Right. Absolutely. And so this is, maybe a little bit of a hot take here, but we've seen several quarterbacks coming into their 3rd year take that giant leap where it just kind of falls into place. The offense clicks, the situation clicks, and we see these guys, really just kind of take off, especially for fantasy. And they were already good for fantasy because they provided the rushing baseline, but the arm and the way that they were used in the offense clicked in. Not going to surprise me if we look up and we see Justin Fields at the end of the season in that category as well. So I think that he is the quarterback making the 3rd year leap, and I think DJ Moore is going to be the beneficiary of that one as well. So I like that one, but I can definitely tell you, as a guy that had DJ Moore on several rosters last year, it was tough sledding having to go that route each week. And I can understand people that may have been burnt by that one and not want to go that one again. So anyway, each their own. All righty. Any other thoughts there? Are we ready to get into some draft strategies?
Let's do it.
Okay. All right, Kevin, we're going to have you start us off here with the different types of draft strategies. And you were kind of rocking the bully RB or the RB heavy strategy. Why don't you take us away?
Yeah. So it was just, again, depending on where you're at in the draft, depending kind of how what things fall to you without forcing the draft, right, is kind of what we're at. But overall, the RB heavy strategy is just that. It is one where you are looking to make your, I guess, your roster based off of heavy top end RB involvement, right? And you're not just trying to spread it out a little bit. So guys that you're looking at there, you're typically drafting at the back end of the 1st round is typically where you're drafting. You can do it in the middle, but it's really hard to do at the front, right? It's hard to do it if you're taking McCaffrey 2nd or 3rd overall and then feeling confident about what that looks like if you go RB heavy-ish. But on the back end, it's super easy. So guys I'm targeting on the back end, Saquon, Nick Chubb, Bijan in round 1. Right? Those are kind of the 3 guys that if you're drafting 10, 11, 12, one of those 3 guys it's not a guarantee, but will most likely fall to you. So that's kind of how you're starting out your roster. What I did in this particular draft is, instead of handcuffing myself to chasing wide receivers as much, when the 2nd round came around, I took the best wide receiver that I felt like was left on the board. So in the 2nd round, I took Amon-Ra St. Brown to kind of at least start me out with, I know I have my one guy in each position group. And then it was kind of maybe not off to the races, but then I was looking for RBs to build out my roster with RBs. So, holy cow, is that mine there on the left, Derek? It looks like
Yep.
it. So Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, Kenneth Walker, Jamal Williams. So I guess, and it goes in that round order. So Nick Chubb, I went St. Brown in the second, and then in the third and fourth, I went back-to-back RB, Mixon and Walker. So at that point, my 2 starting spots and my flex are essentially covered, right? And so then, because I grabbed those 3 positions in my first 4 rounds, then you can kind of balance it out through the rest of the draft. So then I went through, grabbed Brandon Ayuk as my wide receiver 2. I'm actually pretty happy with that. Like in the grand scheme of things, knowing that I'm top end heavy with Nick Chubb being the only guy in Cleveland, Joe Mixon being really the only show in Cincinnati, and Kenneth Walker, who has big play upside. Yes, more of a timeshare than what we thought before they drafted Zach Charbonnet, but still home run capability. We saw it last year, and I still think he's going to see first crack in this Seattle offense. So, 2 guys who are solely the guys, big volume base running backs, and then a home run threat as my third running back. I like that. And then to have St. Brown and Ayuk as my wide receivers there, just kind of, it makes me happy. And I'm sorry if I do this. I'm trying to, there we go. And then drop down. And then James Cook. James Cook is a guy that's been receiving a lot of run out of Buffalo, right? We've been hearing a lot of good things out of him with the injury to why am I now struggling with this? The Sea-Doo injury for
Hines.
Yes, Naeem Hines. Thank you. Sorry. This kind of opens the door even more for James Cook. Yes, Damian Harris is still there, but you really haven't heard a word out of him. Like, I still don't mind Harris late to try and kind of handcuff that if that's what I'm looking for as part of the Buffalo offense. But James Cook is a guy who I have full confidence in drafting and being able to plug him in as a possible flex play or fill in on bye weeks. Followed that up with Jamal Williams, right? There's a lot of running back here. But after that Jamal Williams pick in the eighth, which, to be completely honest, I like the pick. I had underdog best ball on the brain, and my wife and I were driving out to Kansas, so she was reading me names, and she just said Jay Williams. And I was like, oh, Javante's there in the 8th? Yeah, grab it. And then I looked at it, I was like, wait, so what's it say next to his name? She said, no. I said, like, N-O? She goes, yes. I'm like, okay, wrong guy, but okay, I'll still take it, especially with Alvin Kamara being out the first few weeks of the season. He'll see plenty of run there. So after that, I didn't take another running back, right? Like, first 8 picks, my running backs are done. And then it's filling in with some upside guys. Cortland Sutton playing the X in Sean Payton's offense. I like that. Elijah Moore, pairing that up with Deshaun Watson. I like that combination. And he's been getting a lot of good run out of camp. A lot of really good things being said about him. His stock is on the rise. Tyler Higbee, tight end who you can grab a little bit later if you're waiting on tight end with high upside. We've seen him perform well in this McVay offense, and Matthew Stafford likes him and trusts him. I grabbed a second quarterback because I like the fact that if, for whatever reason, Deshaun Watson falters, not that we think he will, but if he doesn't show the improvement that we all expect him to, I have a quarterback on who had a really good year last year. The offense is the exact same. So he's able to come in. He knows the offense, command it, and I have his number 1 receiver, so I get that little stack right there that I like. And then Gerald Everett. This is my dream tight end combination if we're waiting on tight end, is Higbee and Everett both, because then you can just play the hot hand, and you could basically run your whole season with just the 2 of them, and you're good. And then a defense to round it out, whatever. But ideally, RB heavy, like we went through, all my RBs are taken care of in the first 8 rounds. I have 5 running backs in the first 8 rounds. Is that right? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. 5 in the first 8. And then I'm done. And then you worry about depth. You worry about high upside. You pick up your tight end or tight ends because you waited on them, and you're off to the races. Because right now, my combination of running backs, I can use them. I can pair them up and trade, right? I can pair James Cook and Jamal Williams, or James Cook and Kenneth Walker even, and try and trade into a better receiver situation if something happens. Or both those guys are going to get enough run that if one of my top guys go down, I'm not going to be hemorrhaging. I'll be bleeding, but I'm not going to be hemorrhaging.
Alrighty. So what was some of the biggest, like, were there any guys that you wish that you could have pulled the trigger on that maybe just the draft didn't quite fall your way? Anything like that?
Well, so Javonte went earlier than where I had seen him go. I think it's probably closer to where his actual ADP is. Derek, I think you're the one who grabbed him. And again, it's just mentally changing over between leagues. Like, I probably didn't do a good enough job thinking about that. But at that point, at the beginning, or no, I wasn't going to grab him in the 4th, right? So I wasn't going to take him. I wasn't going to take him over my need, or not my need, over Kenneth Walker at that moment. I thought he'd slide. And then you grabbed him at the top, so I just grabbed quarterback at the bottom, right? It's kind of how that felt. So he was one. I think, depending, just because how it shaked out, Alex, you grabbed Montgomery right before I grabbed James Cook, right? Like, I was going to go Monty. You picked him up. Good pick on you. So that's when I pivoted over to James Cook. I'm happy with both of them. I probably would have hit yes on Monty over James Cook at that point, but that's okay. And then why do we both have Deshaun Watson on our roster?
That's
That's
your single and your super flex.
No, my single and my super flex. Sorry.
We'll get to the super flex later.
Sorry.
We'll touch on the single QB first.
And so not many. Like, overall, I am happy with it, right? Like, I really felt like I could go RB heavy in a roster like this and compete. But I think that had I not gone St. Brown, and I would have pushed the issue a little bit, right? Like, if I would have turned around and gone Josh Jacobs or something like that in the early 2nd, I think I would have had a really hard time chasing wide receiver, and I probably would have had to make some moves that I wouldn't have wanted to in a 14-round draft with a kicker and a defense, right? Like, in deeper drafts, you can do that and kind of get away with it because there's opportunities late. But essentially, if I would have given up St. Brown, then I'm chasing like Isaiah Hodgins, Terrence Marshall, Paris Campbell, like guys late in drafts that, you're hoping excel, right? Like, I'd probably have to pull the trigger on Romeo Doubs earlier than where he was going just to make sure I had a receiver on my roster. But then I have to basically, in turn, then I'm giving up Elijah Moore, Tyler Higbee, I think is kind of where he went in this draft, or something, something of that nature. So I am happy with how it went. I'm not going to say it's a perfect draft. I think there's always room for improvement, but as this sits in front of me and as I'm looking at it, I have a mini stack of my quarterback and one of their wide receivers. So I like that. And I like the fact that it's diverse enough that I'm not necessarily pinned to any one situation, and I have enough talent that I think I can trade my way into a better situation if I have to, right? If somebody's quarterback goes down, I can trade Goff or Watson and get a piece back, right? It may not be a lot of pieces, but maybe it's a 1-for-1 deal that kind of helps both if they're stacked at receiver. And I have, 2 top 12 quarterbacks, then I'm able to kind of move around that way. So overall, I am happy with it.
All righty. All right, Alex, let's rock and roll a zero RB approach. You took that one on.
Yeah, and realistically, I think this strategy works really well if you are picking somewhere in the middle in your draft. I think that ideally, if you're gonna go zero RB, the reason that you do that is because you get a shot at Travis Kelce, right? Like that's that's like the one guy. If you got a shot at Travis Kelce, I think you can really base your entire draft, an entire draft strategy on whether or not you get this one dude. So in the single quarterback league, I was able to nab Kelce. I was picking in the 6th spot. I was able to nab Kelce, and I turned around and I thought we'll go for it here. I think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback available for us. I like the stack of him and Kelce. I'm not afraid to pull the trigger on Patrick Mahomes in the 2nd round there, and I'm glad I did because there were 2 quarterbacks that went right after him that the computer took that made me feel really comfortable with Patrick Mahomes. And then I went crazy on wide receiver. I went Devontae Smith, Calvin Ridley, which I really like Calvin Ridley there in the 4th. And I know when we were drafting this, the 5th pick was the one that gave me the most pause. My options were Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, or Christian Watson. And I texted you guys while we were doing this. And I said, I'm not comfortable with the quarterback situation for any of those guys. So I went with the guy that, I have a little bit more, I guess, safety with, in my opinion. And I went with Christian Watson there. Back that up with Tyler Lockett. And so now I've got, not only do I have my top wide receivers, my tight end and my quarterback, I have a guy I can fit into a flex if I want, with Tyler Lockett, who I think still has a role in that Seattle offense. Despite them drafting Jackson Smith and Jigba, and despite DK Metcalf being there, and despite them drafting Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker being there, I still think that Tyler Lockett has a role. So I've got my starting wide receiver spots and a flex spot if I care for it, already all spoken for. And then I went ham on running backs and was honestly surprised at the quality of running back that I could get, not having made a running back pick until the 7th round. My first running back that I took was David Montgomery, followed that up with AJ Dillon. And AJ Dillon, I know that AJ Dillon's kind of a gamble play. If anything, he is a flex play in my opinion, because you don't know if he's going to get the work, right? He's kind of touchdown dependent. Like he will be your goal line guy. It just depends there. Another guy that I think has tremendous upside is Devon Achane there in Miami. Whether or not that clicks right away or it takes a few weeks or whatever, that's a guy that I like there. Same with Dante Foreman in Chicago. I think that he's got a good chance of being the top running back there if Khalil Herbert doesn't, for whatever reason that doesn't work. So a lot of these, yes, I'm taking some swings here on these running backs because I didn't pick anybody on the high end, but I think that there's some pretty high upside. At least that's the lie I've convinced myself while I've put together this roster, and then a kicker and a defense.
All right. I like it. Anything that may have came as like a shock to you when you were going through that?
No. And honestly, I typically am a balanced drafter. I try to find, guys that will fill, spots as they come to me. Like I'm not going to, shoehorn myself into having one strategy or another. I'm very reactionary and try to be proactive to it. But this was very refreshing because it narrowed my scope and it allowed me to just focus in on my position groups of need, which I thought was great. It was really nice. It allows you to focus on getting positional advantages early. And you're allowed to get some of these guys early because you haven't wasted your time trying to get maybe some value at other positions. So specifically at the running back spot. So The thing that I did think that was tough was trying to determine when do I go get that first running back, and honestly, that pick after Christian Watson, that was a really tough one. I could have gone in lieu of Tyler Lockett. The next running back that came off the board was Isaiah Pacheco and Javonte Williams. I thought that Lockett was probably a better value there. Cam Akers had come off just in front of that pick, so it kind of made that pick for me. That I was going to have to go with a Tyler Lockett there or some other receiver, because at that point you're reaching too much for a running back, and there's no need to do that when you've already gained what I consider to be really big positional advantages in the first 3 or 4 picks.
I thought this turned out really well for you.
Mm-hmm.
I was very pleased with the first 2 and felt like I was just cruising from there.
I think the only thing inherently that I would have done different personally is I would have gone with Rashad Penny over A.J. Dillon because of the offense that he plays in. And it's a bit safer of a floor knowing that you have to have this guy play week in and week out.
Yeah,
like
that's a great point.
But other than that, Penny also comes with an injury risk. So you have to balance that out too. Like A.J. Dillon, like he's been nicked, but he hasn't really gone down. We've seen Penny go down for all sorts of kind of fluky reasons almost, right? Like it's not constantly soft tissue stuff. Like this like, broken leg and kind of some weird things like that. So I don't hate it by any stretch, but as I'm looking through this, like that's kind of, as you're going through things, I mean, I think that's kind of the one that I would instantly choose different to build my running back room. But in this exercise, like I'm so stinking running back centric that yes, gimme, right? Like it's just kind of one of those things.
Yeah. And probably the only one that I would have changed out would have been the Tyler Lockett one for Javonte Williams, like who went a few picks after you on that one, right after Pacheco did. But like overall, like looked really, really good, and was definitely one of those that as that draft started going on, you started sniping a few of those guys there, and really kind of taking a few guys off of the roster and off of the ability for me to draft them when I was drafting behind you. So
I mean, realistically, at a certain point, you have to draft running back. So like it just kind of made up the decision for me. It's like you got to get these now, so you need to do that.
Yeah, and I think you summed it up perfectly at the very beginning, right? Like if you were going Travis Kelce, you almost have to just concede the fact that you're going 0 RB.
Yeah.
Like, and it's okay. Especially, I love that Mahomes Kelce stack. Like, if you're able to get that, that's just fun, right? Like, I was able to put together a best ball team that just finished up drafting where I got Mahomes, Kelce, or I went Kelce, then Mahomes, and then later on I got Pacheco, and then deep in the draft, I took Valdez-Scantling. Like, I'm totally banking this best ball league on the Chiefs' ability to just put up points, but I feel like I have it from everywhere, so I'm always going to be getting points when the Chiefs score. But it's fun, right? Like, it's completely different. It's a little bit harder in redraft. Best ball, it's nice because you don't have to worry about, the bad weeks. In redraft, you do. But it is kind of fun to be locked into one team. Like, then you're not just constantly scoping red zone for how your players are doing. You're just kind of watching, and you almost become a mini Chiefs fan in this instance for the season, because as they go, so does your fantasy team.
Yeah. And as far as tight end quarterback stacks, there isn't one better in the league.
No, not even close.
No, not even in the same ballpark. Alrighty. Well, let's go ahead and kick off the balanced draft strategy. I took the balanced side of things, and some of the pros on drafting a balanced roster is you're never really chasing the runs, right? Like you're able to just kind of sit and pick your spot and go how you want to go on that one, right? So you can end up with very solid roster construction. and since you're not having to chase positions, chase players, chase those tiers, you're able to stick to your tiers easier and really draft them cleaner on that one there. So some of the cons though is if you really stick to a balanced roster and balanced draft strategy, you may miss out on some of those positions of power type of things, like really kind of to set off a positional advantage for yourself by doing that one, just because of how you're going through and targeting that one. Now, players that I'm going to be looking at to target early on this one is going to be, on a balance. I'm going to be looking at like a Nick Chubb, a Garrett Wilson, Najee, Justin Jefferson. Like I'm going to be looking at a lot of those kind of guys there. In the mid rounds, I'm going to be looking at, guys like Dameon Pierce, Miles Sanders, Calvin Ridley, Keenan Allen, even a Jerry Jeudy type of guy to go after there. And I'm going to be looking at the quarterbacks kind of on that tail end of the mid draft, like the mid rounds into the late rounds, and looking at, Watson, Tua, Dak, kind of in that 9th, 10th type of round there. And late, I'm going to shoot my shot on those tight ends late. And if I can do that pairing that Kevin talked about earlier with Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett, I'm going to feel like I walked away from the draft with tight end already set, like I drafted that early. So, when I was going through that thing, I was drafted at the very first, 101 on these guys here. And 101, I took Justin Jefferson. I am not in any leagues where I really have a shot at Justin Jefferson, anything like that. So took the shot there, get the explosive high upside, high floor type of wide receiver there. Coupled that back when it came back to me in the second, took Najee Harris, right? So started wide receiver, running back were very balanced in the third. Jalen Waddle was there. I'm going to smash yes on that one and allow him to be my second wide receiver. And then couple that up with J.K. Dobbins. So I definitely like the upside on. It'll be nice when we get him returning to practice. We start getting the reports on that one there. Followed that up in the 5th and the 6th with Miles Sanders and Tua Tagovailoa, and then Michael Pittman. So, at this point, we're through 6-7 rounds now, and we've gone 3 wide receivers, 3 running backs, and we've got our quarterback in there as well. This one, got to a point and saw Evan Ingram hanging out there. Decided I'd go a little bit, shoot the shot on that one a little bit early. With that one, went for a guy that we're going to take a stab and see what Michael Thomas can do there. Couple that up with Romeo Doubs, who is on the my dude list this year. Tyler Algier, Justin Tucker, 49ers, Tank Bigsby is that last round. Really, this was one of those when you're drafting at the first, you've got to make your decision when you get down in there for the last 3 rounds of your draft on, do you want to get whatever's left to you coming back on the kicker, on the defense there, because everybody's going to typically go defense and kicker in rounds. This was a 14-round draft, so 13 and 14 type of thing. Or do you shoot your shot there to try and get out ahead of that and try and get a little bit of a positional advantage there, even as small as it might be, and get a guy like Justin Tucker, get a guy like, and then pick up like the Niners defense. And that's what I did here, was instead of waiting to do that, take a shot deep on a guy that's, Tank Bigsby, potential upside, that kind of stuff. And if it doesn't pan out, he's the first cut candidate to go after the waiver wire on that one there. So that's kind of how I played that one out. Walked away with this one feeling really, really good about it. Really didn't have anything out there that I was like, oh man, I wish I had done that a little bit different. But overall felt pretty good about this roster construct.
How close do you have Najee and Stevenson?
Pretty close. Pretty close on that one. I like the volume that I think Najee is going to see more so on the floor side of things. I think Ramondre Stevenson has a higher upside on it, but I think Najee probably has a little bit safer floor. And that was one of those when I was going through that, because that was definitely in that ballpark on where I would go there. I went with the fact that I'm having to have this as my first running back. I took the guy that I thought would have a little bit of a higher floor on that one, whereas Stevenson, I think, has the higher upside. Took the safer floor, in my opinion, on that one.
Fair enough. I would have been scratching my head on that one for a minute.
I did. I did. And that was literally the decision that I made, was just take the guy that has the higher floor, since I'm drafting what is likely going to be a back end RB1, high end RB2 type of guy, right? Like that's probably where both of those guys finish. So Najee's probably a little bit more safer week to week on a volume play than what I think Ramondre is going to be. So any other thoughts, any other questions you guys had on this one?
How I know the back end of the draft, right? But at the front end of the draft, right? You get to start out with Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like there's more of an advantage, disadvantage, or are you kind of neutral about how the rest of your draft goes after that?
It's kind of one of those that you're playing hero wide receiver a little bit, even at that point, right? Like you're taking a guy that should be able to set that off and get that going. The fact that I was able to couple that up with another guy that in Jalen Waddle there in the third to help round out that position group to the point where I could kick the can farther down the road on additional wide receivers there for depth and things like that, and really focus the next couple of rounds on running back, really made me feel pretty good about that one. So one of those that if I had gone running back, which was definitely in the thought process, and almost went the Najee Ramondre Stevenson route there in the second and third. I was not necessarily wanting to bank my wide receiver 2 on the guys that would have fallen back to me. Being the Drake London, Jerry Jeudy I probably would have been okay with. Christian Watson, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk. I want DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk as my third wide receiver, not necessarily my second wide receiver type of thing. I want them more as the depth piece there, the depth play there, where I'm not necessarily really locked into starting them the first couple of weeks. But the way that the drafts have been falling, really, really liking what's available in the 4th, 5th, and 6th rounds as far as drafts go for the running back position there. And so that's why I went with Waddle, a guy that I feel like could really kind of cement the wide receiver room and then kick that can on down the road, another 5-6 rounds type of thing before I started looking at depth for the wide receiver position.
It's good. Should we talk how things kind of changed a little bit for the super flex?
Absolutely.
Because it was quite different. It was quite different.
I thought Derek's Superflex roster crushed.
Yeah, he did a really good job.
I thought your Superflex roster was a crushed draft.
I walked away from that one feeling phenomenal on that. And so on the Superflex side of things, we'll just go in reverse order. So I'll rock this one, then we'll go back to Alex and we'll finish up with Kevin on the Superflex side of things here. So for the balanced side of things on a Superflex, right? Again, I'm not chasing runs. I'm going after just a balanced roster construction. That way, when I'm getting to each one of these guys, I can really take what I think is kind of the best player available for that one without having to necessarily worry about, am I going to put myself in a position where next round or the next 2 or 3 rounds, I have to go after a guy in this position type of thing to be able to compete on that one. So again, drafted out of the 101, how can you not take Patrick Mahomes there with the 101 and a super flex? So smashed yes, move on. And then came back to me in the second round. Garrett Wilson was hanging out there. I said, yes, please. Let's go ahead and rock and roll that one. Nick Chubb was also there. I said, yes, please again. And did that. And that's one of those are 2 guys in a single QB league. When I get to I'm drafting at the back end of the first, a lot of times I love taking that pairing of Wilson, Chubb, and moving on there. But so the fact that they fell all the way to me into the second and third round there to start it off, went that route and did it. By the 4th round, the quarterbacks had, kind of thinned out pretty decent there. So I took a guy in Aaron Rodgers who has been pretty consistently good for fantasy there. And I'm willing to take that shot as my second QB in a super flex there. Calvin Ridley was still sitting there in the 5th. Went that way. And then I was able to get Brandon Ayuk on as my third wide receiver here. So now I'm sitting here with, 2 wide receivers, two quarterbacks, one running back. I'm sorry, three wide receivers, two quarterbacks, one running back, and then I'm looking at some of these things and really enjoyed the way that the draft had fallen to this point as far as running backs go, and which I was able to go Javonte Williams, Antonio Gibbs, AJ Dillon, Rashad Penny, kind of through the next 4 rounds and really fill out that roster position and felt really good about that. Cortland Sutton was there. Absolutely loved that pick as my 4th wide receiver, Romeo Dobbs as a 5th wide receiver, and then picked up Desmond Ritter as the 3rd quarterback just to give me some depth on that one. Because when you're playing Superflex, if you've got 2 quarterbacks, you've essentially got 0. Picked up my 3rd there, and then made the same decision when I got into the last 3 rounds there. Do I pull it like a round early on kicker and defense? Said yes, went that way, and then ended up taking Jalen Hyatt as the high upside guy on that one. And then once the draft was done, I realized that I forgot to draft a tight end there, which can happen some of these times. But so the first roster move was immediately to drop Jalen Hyatt, pick up Juwan Johnson as the tight end there, and still felt really, really good about this overall draft. What questions, thoughts did you guys have on this one?
I mean, even realistically, you're stringing tight end at that point, right? Like it's a streaming option. So the first of many drops to add a tight end, I'm sure, in that season. At any point in this draft, did you feel like you were stuck?
Yeah. No, I felt like I was just able to maneuver in and out and really go because I had kind of just solidified how I had gone and really was able just to take the draft as the board fell to me.
Yeah, I thought you crushed this for this exercise and seeing where things fell.
That's good.
Yeah, like you said, maybe you'd like to remember tight end, right? And possibly do something different there. Maybe take Ingram in the 9th instead of Dillon if you're thinking about it, or maybe you give up on Dobbs and go a different route, I suppose. But other than that, so what? I mean, you're gonna be streaming tight end. Anything after Evan Ingram, you're pretty much gonna be streaming tight end to see what you can get anyway. So I
would have
really impressed with how this fell.
Yeah, probably
gracefully into your hands.
Probably the move I would have made for tight end would have probably been instead of taking Cortland Sutton there in the 11th, probably taking my shot on Higbee or Everett right there, or even Cole Kmet in that round 11 and gone that route. But again, right, like, and we'll talk more about tiers next week when we get heavily into that. There's not a huge difference there as far as the tiers and how I'm going to have to run a season and all of that. If I'm going Kmet, Higbee, Everett, like realistically, I got to get two of those 3 guys, and there's 2 guys I really want to go with in that mixture. And if I'm not able to get 2 of those 3 guys, I've got to stream the position. And so by missing out on those guys, I'm just streaming the position, and I'll start that off with Juwan Johnson and move along from there. Alrighty, Alex, let's go ahead and hit up that 0 RB strategy here.
Yeah, and so for as good as I felt with in the single quarterback, I don't feel all warm and fuzzy about this one because I'm going 0 RB here. I feel like I nailed the first 4 picks, and then after that, this draft kind of started to get away from me a little bit, and it felt like I was chasing positions at that point. So I led things off. I was picking in the 6th spot again, and I led things off with Jalen Hurts because you have to get quarterback there in that first round because you're about to lose out on any positional advantage if you don't in that 6th spot, because after Derek took Patrick Mahomes, it went Josh Allen, Justin Jefferson, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and then I was there to pick Jalen Hurts, which honestly I'm a little surprised that I was able to pick Jalen Hurts. I think the computer for not recognizing what I think we all recognize, which is that Jalen Hurts is the third best quarterback available in the draft. So I went Jalen Hurts and then picked up Tyreek Hill and Chris Olave, Devonta Smith there in the 4th round. And then I recognize that this is probably where the draft kind of got away from me, but there was a little bit of a giddiness in my selection here. Anthony Richardson was still available, and in a super flex league, I figured I already had a good safe quarterback option with Jalen Hurts that I felt like I could gamble a little bit here and take Anthony Richardson. And what it did was it kind of set off another quarterback run, which may not have happened, but it did set off a little quarterback run, which pretty much solidified that those were going to be the only 2 guys that I was going to get at the quarterback position, save for somebody that I grabbed super late. But I like the idea of pairing Anthony Richardson up with somebody safe. But I think that you also need to make sure that you can have another option should this Anthony Richardson experience or experiment, whichever way you want to go with it, doesn't work for you in the super flex. I'm okay with my running back picks here. I pick up my first running back in round 6, Dameon Pierce, Alexander Madison, and then Rachaad White are picks in the 6th round, 7th round, and 8th round. I'm okay with all of those picks. Nothing, too great about it. I think I took Pat Freiermuth probably a little too early. And then at this point, I'm just trying to fill in and taking I almost got to like a best available at this point and grabbed a Michael Thomas, Damian Harris, Dante Foreman. Here's where I grabbed my 3rd quarterback as a backup for Anthony Richardson and Sam Howell. Grabbed a Jonathan Mingo and then my defense and a kicker, which happens to be Dicker the kicker. And I'll say this once and I'll say it again. Indoor kickers that play a majority of their games indoors are much more valuable than kickers that do not. Just keep that in mind. Indoors, whether climate controlled football is a lot easier on a kicker than not.
Justin Tucker would disagree.
Justin Tucker is an exception to the rule. So that's this draft. I don't feel so great about it. I felt like the single quarterback things just worked out really well, and this one it just felt like I think I didn't get any positional advantages really anywhere outside of maybe getting Jalen Hurts in the 6th spot.
Yeah, it's tough. Drafting in the middle's tough, right? I think I would much prefer either end than being in that 6, 7, 8 range. Like right. That is,
and I would agree with you. I would agree with you on that, but I think it's easier if Travis Kelce is there. Like that, realistically,
in
like
single quarterback,
so
yeah. But,
yeah.
I mean, even in super flex, it's the good thing is being in the middle, you never miss out on a run.
Right.
But you're also always like you're never the instigator almost when you're in the middle of the draft. Like you don't ever get to dictate terms.
Yeah. That was really difficult. The Anthony Richardson pick set off, I think, 3 or 4 more quarterbacks, which was really, not ideal. That's what that set off. And honestly, that run was only stopped because Kevin put a stop to it and drafted a wide receiver. Otherwise, I think that run probably would have really, really done me in. So like I did kind of set off that domino effect, and I kind of wish I wouldn't have because it did a little shoehorn me the rest of the way.
Fair enough. Now, if I was you sitting in there, I would have probably gone a different route on that Anthony Richardson pick because you had Joe Mixon still hanging out there, right? And like you could have gotten your guy that you could be up in there in a tail end RB1 type of deal that you drafted in the 4th round, and you kind of have your wide receiver room all set. You have your standout quarterback there, and then you take you take the guys that fall back there, and there's a chance that you probably get Jared Goff, Derek Carr, maybe somebody like that falls back to you there. So, but that would have probably been the one that the one that I would have pivoted there.
I probably did wait one round too long to go to running back.
Yeah, I mean, where you started there though with Dameon Pierce, Alexander Madison, Rashad White, like you definitely got guys that will have volume there and should produce for you week in, week out. You just may not get those guys that propel your team up there to winning weeks, but probably won't lose you the week either. So.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other thoughts on the 0 RB for Superflex? All right, Kevin, you're back up with the RB heavy in Superflex.
I hated this draft.
I could tell when you were going through it.
This was pretty rough.
This was painful. Was painful. So started out with Austin Eckler in the 1st round, followed it up with Deshaun Watson in the 2nd. With it being a Superflex, knowing that quarterbacks were coming off, I probably chased that one just a touch too much. Like I probably should have realized that on the way back up, like not many teams were going to go their 2nd quarterback in their first 3 picks. And I could have done something a little different. And so honestly, that was probably the start of my demise. But going RB heavy, I accomplished that. Eckler in the 1st, Jacobs in the back end of the 3rd, Najee in the beginning of the 4th. The beginning of the 4th. So my running backs are set. Like I feel good about that room. I am positionally advantaged, right? As we've been talking about. I feel good about that. I will take my top 3 running backs against anybody else's in this entire league. That's about the end of where my good things go. In hindsight, I didn't necessarily have to take Najee. I could have waited for Joe Mixon and grabbed a better receiver in the 4th round, maybe a Devonta Smith, maybe a Calvin Ridley even, something in that nature to go there. It's not how I did it. So I ended up with my first 2 wide receivers in the 5th and 6th round being Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that if I trusted Tennessee's offense. Like, I want Hopkins to be good. Realistically, do I feel like he finishes inside the top 24? Yes, I do. But I don't know that I was comfortable with it. It was a position of need at that moment. And so I went ahead and grabbed it. But by sacrificing that, I missed out on a lot of 2nd quarterbacks, right? And so I went that. And then I finally took my 2nd quarterback in the 7th with Bryce Young. I was debating between Bryce Young, Tyler Lockett to help solidify my wide receiver room, or Jordan Love. And I pulled the trigger. I don't have many shares of Bryce Young. I knew that I'd have to come back quickly and grab my 3rd quarterback to kind of balance that out a little bit and protect myself in my super flex. So David Montgomery in the 8th, I was happy with that, right? It protects me from injury. It protects me if Josh Jacobs decides to sit out. David Montgomery fills that flex role for me, and I'm okay with that. I can live through that. So I like the Monty pick. And then in the 9th, I went Kenny Pickett. Not pounding my chest proud about that, but I felt like I had to take Kenny Pickett in the 9th to protect my Bryce Young pick. And I could at least play matchups in my super flex because I had waited for my 2nd quarterback a little bit longer than probably what I wanted to. So had to play around with that. But follow that up with Elijah Moore. Again, I like that. I like having that little mini stack with him and Deshaun Watson. Plus, I like all the things that I'm hearing out of Browns camp about Elijah Moore. The scary thing is I have 2 Browns on my roster, like 2 Brown wide receivers on my roster. Right. I now have Amari Cooper and I have Elijah Moore. Not good roster management to have 2 wide receivers from the same team. So unless they're both, Philadelphia Eagles or Miami Dolphins, it's probably not going to pan out overly well for you. So I'm going to have to navigate that, but maybe I get lucky and can, pair Elijah Moore and one of my other quarterbacks up and upgrade at wide receiver or upgrade at quarterback, possibly if someone's quarterback goes down. So there's options there. And then after Elijah Moore went Elijah Mitchell, just to kind of make sure I had a piece of that San Francisco rushing offense. Elijah Mitchell was going late enough. I didn't necessarily love anything else that was sitting around me. I could have gone tight end, but decided to wait one more round where I got Gerald Everett. Super happy about that. I am okay with the Gerald Everett pick. And then I went high upside wide receivers to kind of round out that room for me. So I went Zay Jones, who had a really good year, finishes, I think, wide receiver 24 with Trevor Lawrence last year. If he's going to finish right around that fringe wide receiver 2 territory, I feel like that's a pretty good pick there in the 13th. So I like the upside that can be involved with that in case of injury or if I need to put him into my flex spot in certain weeks. And then Paris Campbell in the 14th. Again, someone from the Giants has to catch all these balls. Someone. Is Isaiah Hodgins? Is it Paris Campbell? Is it Wan'Dale Robinson once he comes back? Is it Jalen Hyatt, who is, as a rookie, is going to take the league by storm? I don't necessarily think it's that. I think it's between Hodgins and Campbell. And so I went ahead and dipped my finger back in the Paris Campbell well after I said I wasn't going to do it. But in the, 14th round, it's an easy drop at that point, I felt like. So did that and then followed up with a pair of Dolphins in the defense and Jason Saunders, their kicker. So I didn't love this one, guys. Like, I felt like I chased a little bit more than what I wanted to. I felt like the RB heavy approach, yes, I'm out of balance, right? I mean, you're heavy into one position, but I felt like it made me really take some big flyers at the end of the draft and guys that I'm probably not going to have in my roster most weeks. And because of not having them in my roster, I'm going to miss the big weeks where they do blow up. Like there's just a lot of things about this where I'm looking at this roster and I see holes, right? I see holes where I'm going to have to hit the waiver wire. I see holes where I'm going to have to find trade partners. Like I am going to have to build the rest of this team out because I did not draft a team where I can sit and go, okay, for the first 5 weeks, I'm going to see how everything shakes out. I don't feel like I have that. I feel like I have 2 weeks worth of, okay, I'm going to let this shake out real quick. And then I'm going to try and make some quick moves of people who maybe got a slow start, have to take a gamble on a trade, things like that to improve my roster. Because I know I need some help at receiver. Gerald Everett, I'm okay with at tight end, but I'm ultimately going to end up dropping Jones or Campbell. It feels like to stream a tight end if I want to keep Everett on my roster. And in Kellen Moore's offense, I do want to keep Everett on my roster. I really like him this year. So it was not the most comfortable draft I've had. And in hindsight, I probably would run this through. I would probably run this through a lot differently, honestly, guys. Like I would probably run through and I'd probably not do Deshaun in the second. Bijan, for whatever reason, was still on the board. I probably would have gone RB heavy that way. I probably would have gone Eckler, Bijan, and then a quarterback, and then tried to fill out the rest of my roster and see if I like it any better. But hindsight's 2020.
Yeah, I feel like both of these, like the strategy for Derek playing balanced in the super flex in that one spot really paid off for him. Going the 0 RB approach in the 6th spot was fine, and there was it was one pick that kind of derailed the rest of my draft. And Kevin, it was just again, maybe that one pick there in the 2nd round that kind of put you in a bind, and really wanted to probably go back and redo there. But overall, I think employing these strategies in a single quarterback you can really come away with some good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely something to be said about being able to rock and roll like an RB heavy or zero RB, and it plays out incredibly well in a single QB league. Superflex gets a little bit tougher to do that, and you've got to be able to navigate that definitely a little bit differently on that one, just because of quarterbacks going, instead of being able to wait all the way into the the 8th, 9th, 10th round to pull off your quarterback. Like you're gonna have to rock and roll something different there, or you're gonna have to really just kind of give up on the position and hope that you end up taking 3 guys in the 7th, 8th, 9th round type of thing to try and round that out and do it that way. And you're kind of struggling and just trying to play the matchup between 3 quarterbacks on tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 type of QBs there. So definitely gets a little bit tougher on that for sure. Any other thoughts here on any of the draft strategies?
I think each one has its pluses and minuses, right? Now, we could shake this up and change strategy and position, right? Like it would look a lot different if you're really trying to hyper focus in on, being balanced at the back end or being zero RB at the back end than what it looked like with mine going RB heavy, right? Like it's just, it is what it is. As far as each draft being a little bit different and each strategy working until it doesn't, right? And ultimately, I think Alex and I, more so with the Superflex League, it shows you have to be a little fluid, right? Like you can come in with a game plan in mind, but you have to be able to pivot and flow throughout the draft. Because if you pigeonhole yourself in, like we purposely did for this exercise, neither one of us are extremely happy with this draft. Whereas Derek, yes, being at the top end of the draft helps, but really in any position, if you have a strategy, but you're able to be fluid and you're not chasing runs and you're able to just construct the best roster in a balanced type format, especially with Superflex leagues, it really is beneficial to you. So, they're examples. They're examples. Some things we did right, some things we did wrong, some things we would each do differently if we were in different roles and the same concepts. So, but ultimately, if as soon as you start chasing, right, and as soon as you start feeling like you're behind somewhere, your decision-making process becomes a little bit weaker, right? Because once you start chasing, you hyper-focus in on what you're chasing after, and you could leave other things on the board, and you make a hasty decision that a round later you're going, dang it, why did I do that? And that's a tough position to be in a draft, because then you focus on it and you're constantly trying to fix your mistake, unless you can kind of clear the memory bank and go, okay, we're starting from here going forward.
I think what I liked the most about it too was that we did pick in the same spot, and the difference in league really showed the difference in available players when it was your turn to pick, and the value of those players and how different they were, based on the different league. Because I think a lot of times, you think that you're picking in, the first pick, the 6th pick, the 12th pick. Depending on what type of league it is, I mean, they're different players that have different valuations at those spots, and so that's what I really enjoyed, was seeing the different, players that we each ended up with, despite the fact that we were picking in the same spot. The only thing that changed was the one position, and adding that super flex in there, which, as we all know, for the most part, going to be a second quarterback. So that was a very fun thing to see, just like how different the rosters did construct. And I was still able to get some of the same players that I got in the single quarterback. They were still around, but it was a stretch at some points to get them, or it felt like I caught a break to get them.
Yeah. And one of the things that definitely will help you, right? Like, Kevin, I believe you said that stay fluid when you're drafting there, right? And being able to pivot where you need to pivot and things like that. One of the things that certainly will help you do that when it comes, time for your fantasy draft is to have your positions broken up into tiers. And that's one of the things that we've talked about extensively is being able to draft by tiers and know where your tiers are, and that will help you come draft time there. But let's kind of quickly just kind of go around here because we're going to dive super deep into the tiers next week, but just kind of quickly hit up some of the points on, how you kind of look at some of the tiers and maybe where, how you go about constructing your own tier base there. And we'll actually get in and break down the tiers next week.
So I'm a big proponent of tiers and taking the time to set it out, and whether you have your notepad next to you during the draft or whether you just kind of look over it and you have ideas of guys that, okay, these X amount of players I like in this range. So the benefit to that is if the guy that you're eyeballing, right, gets taken right in front of you, right, you get sniped. It happens. God knows it happens every time, almost by round, when Derek and I are drafting side by side with each other, and we just kind of text each other back and forth, going "damn you." But it does help you pivot over to another player in that position if that's where you feel like your position of need is, and that's where the value is. Or even at times, if you have your big like 250 board, right, a different position, but can still add value to your roster. So it's all about what is acceptable in that range. And everybody's tiers are going to be slightly different, right? Some people might only have 3 tiers for quarterbacks. Some people might have 7 tiers for quarterbacks, right? Just depending on how you're breaking that down. Same thing. Tight ends is a big one where you'll see a lot of difference. And we'll kind of show you that, right? Like everybody's kind of subscribed on this show, at least, to it's Travis Kelce or bust. Like he is in a tier by himself. But how many guys fall into tier 2? Is it 2 guys? Is it 3 guys? Is it 4 guys? And then what does it look like after that? Same thing, especially with these wide receivers. Wide receivers in rounds 2, 3, and 4, right? There's a lot of wide receivers taken in rounds 2, 3, and 4. But where's the appropriate time to pivot? Who are guys that you're going after that you like, and who are guys going in that round or in that round range where you were willing to give them up, right? Deebo Samuel was on the duds list, right? Or don't list. He is a guy that for this show, we are not actively targeting Deebo Samuel, right? So when we do our tier rankings, we are going to have him much lower than a lot of other people do. We don't like the situation. We've explained that in the player profile breakdown that you can find on YouTube. We touched on it tonight in the beginning segment of the show. We will show that next week as we kind of get into breakdowns of these. But it's the ability to stay fluid and pivot and not necessarily look at your draft board and go, well, crap, now what? And now you're sitting there and the clock's down to 10 seconds and then you just grab a guy and then you hate your decision for the rest of the draft.
Yeah, I think the best way to look at it is trying to get the best value at that position, and knowing where the value breaks are. Like we call them tier breaks, but it's a value break. There's a big drop off between player A to player D. But is it as big of a drop off between player A and player B, or is player B to player D, kind of in that same? Are they negligible in what their difference in value is? So that's really what the tier drafting is all about, knowing the value of that positional group, of those players in that group, and how they stack up against other position groups and where you can get the most value from. So. It's a very, very, it's one that we've been harping on this show since basically we started. And it's one that has allowed at least my co-hosts to win plenty of cash and trophies if you employ this draft strategy. You know, we talked about draft strategies tonight, but like having a good tier list, it's crucial if you want to get a leg up on everybody else in your league going into draft night.
Right. And yeah, the tier list, and we'll show this next week, of course, but the tier list will definitely break out very different depending upon who's doing it, right? Like, I know one of the ways that I set up my tier list is I go through and tend to stat out and player project, every single player out there for a roster that tends to be fantasy relevant, right? And then I kind of go through and I put him on hey, I think this group of guys is going to be within, 20 or 30 points of each other at the end of the season fantasy, in fantasy points when it's all said and done. And that way, when I'm sitting there and I'm drafting and I've got that group of guys there, I go, okay, cool. I know that each one of these guys will be within probably a point or two of each other on a week in, week out basis. And then I can pivot and go from there. But yeah, and then some folks will go through and put that in there, and they'll just kind of base it on some rankings. And I know some guys out there that go, okay, cool, I'm doing this position group as these 5 guys, then the next 5 guys, and the next 5 guys, and they just kind of break it out there. So again, kind of each your own, and we'll go into how we kind of go about that and how we kind of determine that, as well as breaking out the tiers and where our tier lists kind of are for across the positional groups there. So should be a lot of fun. Make sure that you're tuning in and rocking and rolling with us on that one. But guys, any final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
Like, subscribe, follow. We are dumping player profiles all over YouTube thanks to our wonderful program management and editing team, aka Mr. Derek. We appreciate that. So if you have any questions about a guy, you can find our initial takes on YouTube. Feel free to hit us up with questions, drafting, trades, anything that you guys need as far as fantasy advice or someone to bounce opinions off of. We're here to help, and we love interacting with you all. So thank you much.
Absolutely. All righty. Alex, give me the head shake. He's good to go. All right. So that's going to do it for us. Kevin just said it. Make sure that you hit the like, subscribe button. Head over to the YouTube, youtube.com/@goodoldboysff. Hit that subscribe button. Bring that notification bell. Like I said, we've got 7-8 videos a day getting released to help y'all through your player profiles and getting your draft strategies ready to rock and roll. So make sure you're heading over there and getting that done. But that's going to do it for us tonight. All the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, @goodoldboysff. He's Kevin. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloo.